41. Once about every 10 hours of my howling doom, I try to lighten up with a few seconds of good news. Solar, wind, and other forms of green energy have plunged in cost and skyrocketed use worldwide to bring us, in 2025, to human greenhouse emissions level off, then decline. Happy now? Good. Back to howling doom. Most emission crisis pros hope, with little assurance, for net zero human greenhouse gas production by 2050. At best, slowing Earth's industrial 1.5 degrees centigrade warming to a 2.0 centigrade degrees halt. Every scenario today begins our second 25 years straight of ever-decreasing regular rainfall, which has already burned lakes 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and totally empty during the last 30 years of human emissions 30% increase. A 3.0 centigrade Earth heating that utterly ends regular rain in lakes is just as likely, caused by unrelieved coal-burning addiction, no doubt killing most trees to quintuple 2025 emissions, kicking us 4 degrees centigrade up. Now which 1% of life remains? Human survival planners conferences, entirely minus thousands of desalination factories, thousands of atmosphere CO2 scrubber plants, and 1 million miles of forest and farm irrigation hoses, can only leave on the docket getting our affairs in order for human suicide. The million experts' very worst fears of really rough 2100 conditions will certainly not be realized by the 6 to 10 billion killed 40 to 70 years earlier. You don't believe me? Go scan the many new islands rising above your plunging municipal reservoir, and talk with farmers on your way back about their vanishing rain, impending irrigation cutoff, and dying crops. Now worry. Now act. For 20 years, net zero CO2 emission holy grailers had us believing that certainly vital human excess halt heralds simultaneous climate and crisis control. Today, NASA informed us that if 100% of human CO2 emissions halted today, our stratosphere's osmosis back to Earth of its 420 parts per million savage drought excess back to normal pre-industrial temperature and rainfall 260 parts per million would nicely relieve our crisis in years. How many? 20? No, 1,000 or more. Does a single one of the million expert net zero saviors realize that around mid-century, 50 straight skyrocketing scorch and drought years drive us to far over 500 parts per million CO2, long since ending regular rain, nourishing any crops, and keeping any house water faucet running? The very few still alive look forward to their vaunted net zero human CO2 production, allowing stratosphere CO2 decline osmosis back to 260 parts per million normal rainfall return, not so long after the year 3000. The height of 2025 25-year droughts, regular rain, and lake level crisis today relentlessly worsening until utterly unrelieving net human CO2 zero. means that we rush vast new freshwater technology and vast factory CO2 stratosphere scrubbing and monstrous crop and forest irrigation and lake refilling every minute, day, and year, funded by relentlessly increasing seizure of corruption and war money, or you are gonna watch your dear children suffer and die. Nasty word to end a sentence, though I did hit ya where ya live. I worry that even our ultimate billion activist 10-year new treaty government rescue will be too slow. I'd be thrilled to be proven flat wrong about drought fast worsening to finish off forests, lakes, farms, and us. So let's demand the research plus maximum mitigation of all stunningly obvious existential crises. Listen close to Chicken Little here. Just don't fully believe the bird brain until he's science proven. Let me note what facts are in. Survival grain yields are plunging worldwide everywhere that farmers don't get the rain or arrange river irrigation as needed. Mostly drought-caused starvation deaths will permanently skyrocket from last year's 9 million. A major fraction of 67 million refugees last year fled climate-induced hunger and thirst in their homeland. This century's climate refugees may reach 1 billion. 10,000 fleeing death each day crash America's southern border. Asylum seekers now overwhelming American cities' attempts to shelter and feed them. The next 10 years of drought, say I and every expert, will make the last 24 look like the Garden of Eden surrounded by rainforests, which I remind you today are in terminal drought. Water them soon, or quintuple emissions from total tree death will leave coastal evaporation metal sheet catchers your only source of water. The eggheads try to educate us, but only with look in my microscope snapshot focus. The internet overflows with analysts predicting huge crop yield increases when atmosphere CO2 doubles, as it soon will from pre-industry normal. In fact, their experiments do show, with all other growth conditions ideal, plants exposed to elevated CO2 grow faster and greener while using less water. When you ask them that why are several major grain yields plunging over 15% while every plant sucks in your lovely extra CO2, only one reply is possible. What researcher studies multiple variables in the real world? Go talk to students of modern drought. They'll tell you that excess CO2 heats air and earth to evaporate surface water and shrink regular rainfall, both fully essential for plant survival hydration. Wherever mechanical irrigation doesn't replace the disappearing natural water, crops die, as per today's worldwide news. We only found that plants should grow better and use less water when inspiring high CO2 in our labs. You're talking about millions of actual crop fields that got so little water that an ocean of CO2 couldn't save them. My reply would be more than a little angry. So you know 10 times better than to predict that CO2 through the roof could ever be great for crops, lest you encourage agricultural planners and government policymakers to invite that CO2 explosion. As you also, real-world informed, know that skyrocketing CO2 first drought dehydrates crops, quite dead and unable to suck on any more green and grow carbon dioxide. With friendly researchers like you, We sure don't need enemies. Folks, for the next 100 research studies that you lobby and sue for, tell the pros to leave the change a single variable research microscope on the lab bench. Widen your lenses to view the entire human race destroying itself by many variables, radiating and worsening in chain reactions. From those disaster unto extinction studies must emerge the next 100 solve the identified problems experiments to finally design and implement the projects, laws, and mass inspiration to stop, indeed reverse, our destruction. I ask you to file federal and international court lawsuits to enforce now abrogated nuclear and conventional disarmament treaty law. I also encourage your work for far stronger peace treaty law to eliminate World War weapons merchandising, invasion armies, and the private to public bribery for both. The same treaty pounding those swords into every human family's new global cooling air supply and new freshwater rescue from total drought extinction. That public campaign finance only tenant and sued for national laws alone should restaff formerly corporation corrupted governments with us clean, private, and world family guardians. Our human care plan made law will be the exact polar opposite of his story's leaders always raking in their 1% top dog robberies and wars, temporary spoils before everyone's 100% extinction. Patriarchy's con is enjoy our muscular, fatherly, fictional protection of your patriotic pride and hate while we ever expand our opportunities to mine your taxes for the wealth, power, and health only ours, and selected public parasite corporate cronies, while the ever-expanding underclasses remain poor, powerless, sickening, and finally all dying. The resulting impending suffering unto death of 1 billion families is merely the mildly regretted but mostly ignored cost of doing business. Never mind that most constitutions were fully written to prohibit public servants from giving the rest of us the business. Well, doesn't true his story make our fight crystal clear? We kicking yo business out of our government, yanking yo sticky paws out of our precious little pockets, jackals. Steve's Law. Government leaders allowed private conspiracies incessantly, instinctively redesign their jobs to feast on our public treasury banquet, starting and ending with their weapon and pollution business cronies. Ending? Million planet ending. Got that? Who do we blame? The 1% top dog instinctive fortune hunters, or the 99% sheep who lie down for family and humanity ending abuse long since, centuries clear enough to wake up and fight? Well, who did Thomas Jefferson make responsible? You, no one else, can and must alter destructive government to again effect our safety and happiness. His declaration demanded not only of rebels against foreign tyranny, but also the responsibility of all posterity ever threatened by domestic power grabbers. His immortal words certainly spurred me to demand your new and old human family laws to directly saw off the jackal's teeth and claws, their outrageously legal, laissez-faire theft and murder anarchy against democracy and humanity, robbing, raping, and killing for our damn money. So does my clarion call make me special? No, I ain't done shit until I launch miles above scribble and whine to hammer and force. Will I try? And probably fail? A 71-year-old fallen out of the saddle. Only you can save the world. Why is our border defenses only swords into plowshares treaty so humanity saving essential? Survey the past and present international organizations and treaties that propose human rescue. Our one nuclear and conventional disarmament treaty has zero enforcement provisions, necessitating our fight to reverse 195-nation abrogation. The United Nations issues pretty please non-binding General Assembly resolutions, and its Security Council's single aggressors can and always do veto any international action to halt its scorched earth attacks. UN humanitarian rescues consist of begging for 1% of the money needed to fix any damn thing. A world signed voluntary Paris Accords to fix our climate. Pretty please, never mind if you don't. No two human beings have ever written or signed a wish list to suck out air CO2 or find and pump crops, forests, and us fresh water to replace the disappearing, utterly dooming 8 billion lightning fast. This fall's giant climate conference is hosted by the world's #1 oil seller, who ordered the entire assemblage to delete its near consensus goal to phase out the fossil fuels killing us all. All his stories, national and international leadership, with the single and wonderful, if not actually life-saving exception of booming green energy to temporarily stop emissions rise, rushes us to our doom with their private scamming, thieving, and warring until you, private family guardian, go public with law to fold the human family to your motherly bosom. Every day I try to crystallize my 20-hour rant to something useful. Instead, it grows like cancer. Your synopsis would be 100 times more expert and focused. Let's you and I send our best to every judge, executive, legislator, lawyer, and scientist on earth, and also communicate everywhere to our private, gone public co-conspirators, many of us to become the new survival lawmakers. Don't forget that the necessary opposite of placing trust in our own nation's leaders to change law they only designed or violated to help themselves, not us, is to get in regular contact with other nations' citizens, not just our own, to support each other's movements for national three-branch government reforms, to further world treaty work that we negotiate among citizens first, to then lead our cotton-picking leaders. Over 1,500 federal lawsuits have been filed around the world by citizens severely harmed or imminently endangered by global warming, most demanding more government and industry action to rapidly reduce CO2 emissions. Each private plaintiff believes that all the world's governments and every energy-consuming industry and vehicle could lower emissions to improve all 8 billion Earthlings' living prospects. You and I better educate the world that present accomplishment to peak and then lower CO2 venting barely begins world survival rescue. 24-year drought plus several more decades of stratosphere CO2 increase, even from declining emissions, projects imminent, not century-end, disappearance of our lakes and rivers, keeping us drinking and breathing. Every year for decades ahead will be history's hottest and driest. Absolutely certain, without your new freshwater intervention to fast kill currently parched forests dead. Multiplying our momentarily shrunk emissions by 5. Replacing every damn drop of regular rain with far-flung, undependable floods only. While a 125-degree heat stroke kills myriads across unair-conditioned, dying economies, just momentarily sparing the richest billion, consuming the last food and water, that is. Well, you know me, I never detailed chain reaction death without leaping to our rescue fight back. The legal, political, industrial fixes. We could win most of those 1,500 minimized dirty industry, energy, and vehicle suits, but we're still dead meat and ducks unless you file 1,500 more to collect and pipe vast new fresh water to forests, lakes, farms, and your water faucet. Also to be supplied from every raindrop tanked up, instead of spilling off of your roof or into street gutters to nowhere useful. Or forget the whole thing. Just keep leaving the world of water management pros in charge. 100% will continue only rationing disappearing rivers and lakes until the inevitable Tuesday morning when 100,000 take calls from bone-dry water treatment plants. Every pencil breaks. Well, now it's too goddamned late to Google the internet nut who shrieks, "New supply or die." Their last few years of crisis non-resolution was cut off farmers, factories, and your Browning lawn H2O. That ought to reserve your 8 glasses a day another year or less before the reservoir, lake, river, and water plants all suck mud, then cracked earth. What now? $20 a bottle water hoarded by the rich. End of the world. Nobody thought ahead to project obvious skyrocketing drought to our certain fast end. No time or economy left now to mount the decade plus gear up to ocean evaporation replacement of vanished regular rain. Here my speech is way too late while you bang your head on the table. Instead, here's what you and I do today. Mount history's 100 times biggest, fastest world project to deliver floods and oceans of steam everywhere needed. Full forest irrigation would probably be impossible. We'll struggle for decades to save a portion. Also massively planting more trees on every square foot of earth that we can water. Atmosphere CO2 will keep rising, even during maximal human industry emissions cuts. This demands another, even more monstrous, hurried new industry, literally thousands of atmosphere CO2 scrub-out factories. Add every one to your fresh water supply lawsuits, hammering both through cleaned-up legislatures that must keep jacking our court-ordered funding. Or forget Crazy Steve's agenda. because you're too busy with your own plan B. Fill your garage with bottled water while you can still afford it. FYI, the water will run out, and soon every crop parched before harvest strips every grocery shelf too. But you thought ahead and stashed in 3,000 cans of pork and beans. Those, of course, are time-limited too. So now what? One last stock-up. The medicine cabinet with fentanyl. Why crawl from bed to bathroom for 2 weeks, parching and starving, when you, honey, and kids could light candles, put on lovely Chopin music, share the last of the beans and water, then wash down handfuls of eternal sleepers and doze off in each other's arms? Unfortunately, what nags your peaceful end is not one of those plan Bs and Cs did anything but ration disappearing stuff to your extremely premature deaths, including what we've all done for 10 millennia, leave the human support leadership driving to the piggy clowns always corrupted to abuse and kill us for their temporary fattening. Your final sweet party goes real sour when you keep thinking, why didn't I wake up to this obviously coming horror years ago when rescue was possible? Without my interventions, along with a movement of family savers, our leaders ever stayed working only for themselves and their war weapon selling, tax thieving cronies, all corrupted and oblivious to impending war and drought doom for us 8 billion human victims. Only I could have saved the world, thus saving my precious family too. And only by taking direction from amateur, self-appointed futurologist and rescue technology planner Steve. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Bullshit alarm. No, I'm begging foundations to research all of my prescient but absolutely unprofessional theories, hard news based though they are. You demand that your congressmen and senators submit research appropriations bills while you hammer courts to take over from the other two branches, letting us die. Give the pros a scant year to nail plant and human drought near future increasing death research. Then force politicians to fund large projects to build every flood, rain, and ocean steam new water source that I hammer. Rain catchers are already in American and Australian use, and ocean steam collectors are fully designed. Only flood piping is my little fevered brainstorm described earlier. You must sue worldwide and lobby Congresses for forest, crop, lake, and municipal water rescues. In many nations, though, we face Supreme Court rejection from corporation-selected justices. So demand that executives and legislatures pack in new constitutionalist black robes, each promising to obey founders' orders to return special interest captured governments to their general welfare duty. Boom! Suddenly a new court majority votes for our people, not fat cat rescues. They'll grant you hundreds of suits for fresh water, hundreds to ban private campaign gifts, and hundreds to secure constitutional national defense by forcing obedience to our treaty law banning nuclear weapons. Initially with the sincere, ongoing world negotiation called for. But first, today, before pressing our 5, 10, and 20-year world saving, you must appeal to every NATO and American executive and legislator with our emergency demand that attack weapons for attempting to totally defeat and drive out history's gigantic, unscrupulous nuclear power not be given to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin then rather certain to nuclear bomb Zelensky's heroes to death. And days later, the entire world with 5,000 nuclear missiles and megatons. The righteous Western world's prior conventional escalation would in fact be deliberate or just doomsday stupid destruction of our Constitution-ordered national defenses against invasion, not to mention extermination, that every founder ordered every judge, legislator, executive, and other government employee of us to secure, not sabotage. We'll need to add on up to those 7 constitutionalists to outvote the 6 injustices whose only agenda is, in America, for their favorite bribing private businesses, forcing no longer public leader destruction of all by theft of our taxes and safe regulation just for their stinking profits. Our new clean majority will also grant your suits to order maximum building of CO2 scrubber plants and delivery of piped floodwater and ocean evaporated freshwater to forests, farms, and us before we all parch and starve to death. Extremely modest requests when you think about it, right? And at the same time, we're nailing court human rescue those public committed, not privately corrupted presidents, senators, and congressmen that equal time public campaign finance elects will hop their offices out of bed with the suddenly powerless ex-cronies. Now, when we ask them to jump to lose war and CO2 and find water instead, they'll stop saying F you and ask, how high? Of course, they'll see and act on our rescue truth when they ain't being paid not to. If you'll recall, I stole that line from Sinclair Lewis. Now, where are we going to get the moxie, the fire to jump up and in for ourselves? From the Pointer Sisters. Jump for my love. Ain't no privately corrupted leaders for oligarchy, always destroying, never yet achieved democracy and self-government, ever gonna save our lives. Why not? His alone story, 10,000 years hammered. Let's start a new book of love today. Her story, our story. The children's story, all about elevating and saving the human family just to save yours, you selfish sweetie.